Welcome back to Mediums in Action with me, Martin Lake-Wilton, and my good friend and expert medium, Ian Doherty. Hi, Ian.
Hiya, Martin. I hope you're keeping well and everybody's safe and sound. And it's nice to be chatting to you again on this topic. It's interesting. It'd be nice to hear what our listeners think. If you've got questions, please ask.
Yeah, absolutely. I think Surviving Death has been one of those programs where it has raised questions, and I think it's raised questions in where people are questioning. And what I mean by that is that they're exploring their own beliefs and the questions that are raised in the program itself. So I think if anything, the fact that the program is raising these questions within the paranormal community. Admittedly, there's a bit of a fringe that's been very negative towards the series, but generally, I think it's been quite positive. I've gone on Twitter and I've seen quite a few people kind of going, "Wow, oh my God, I didn't realise about all this." So
Yeah, no, it is. I mean, like I say, there was an interesting thing on the news earlier, the local news, Lincolnshire news, saying that there was a deacon from Lincoln Cathedral, saying that obviously because of COVID they're having to do online, and they were saying there's a big uptick in interest in what they are doing and from a younger audience.
I mean, we said there'd be a bigger increase in spirituality, and I've seen that the churches and gurdwaras and mosques are all seeing increased interest and people logging into online sessions and just trying to. I think it's a sense of community as much as anything.
Yeah, definitely. I think people, whether it's the negative side of people passing away due to COVID or not being able to get into hospital because, it's all full up the NHS, doing their best, bless them. I think people want to know their answers. They want to question more, I think.
Yeah, absolutely. So, Surviving Deaths come at an opportune time, really. So, last week we talked about the mediums episodes, and this week we're going to talk about the other episodes. So, episode 1 starts off, and I thought it was a really good episode. It was called Near-Death Experiences.
Yeah.
From my perspective, kind of being brought up in the late 70s and early 80s and reading reading books by D. Scott Rogo, Ray Moody, I think it is. They were very centered on near-death experiences, and they always fascinated me. So to watch this program and actually see witnesses or people who've experienced these events was absolutely fascinating. I mean, what did you think to it?
I thought it was done very, very tastefully. It wasn't over dramatic. It was, I wouldn't say it was matter of factly, but the way they put it over was very respectful to the person, as they were saying, as he started with that woman, sort of getting stuck in that white water. It must have been a terrifying thing for her, bless. And then looking at it, I just find it fascinating. I know there's some science elements. It's a factor of the brain. When you're doing this, it's everything closing down. You see a tunnel, and maybe in some of the cases, but there is more. I mean, I'm glad also that science are doing more research into it. It seems to me they want answers to it, so as they're doing it, there's more and more people reporting it does happen, and they start coming back with that thirst that I want to live life, I want to get the best out of it, so I think it has a very positive slant to everything, in all honesty.
That episode was handled really, really well. As you say, it kind of just showed you the witness experience.
Yeah.
It allowed you that room to then make your own decision on what happened as near-death with the near-death experience. Yeah. At the end of it, I thought that was really well done. I don't think I've seen another series or documentary kind of show that level of evidence or that kind of open-mindedness.
And that is it. Yeah, sorry, Martin. It was very open-minded. It reminds me of a D. Scott Rogo book. It's the way that he writes, giving you the evidence for and against, but letting you make up your own mind.
Yeah, absolutely. I thought it was really good. I mean, what's your feelings about near-death experiences? Do you think it's a chemically thing, or
It's heavily influenced by a person's belief. There's a book Closer to the Light by Melvin Morse. That's Near Death in Children, and the Return from Silence in D. Scott Rogo, and it puts over, if a person is from a religious background, let's say Christian, then they will see angels, or they'll see who they term as being God, because it's that a factor of the brain at that time of death that is like a bridge between the physical and the spiritual, as you go from one plane to the other. But I can only go on what I've read, because I've and talked to people, because I haven't had that sort of near death type of thing, so really I just find it fascinating. There is the element, is it the brain? And I do feel you have to, whether you believe it or not, or whether you want to hear it or not, you have to look at both sides, and is it the brain? Is it the faculty of closing down? But then again, you're coming back and you're thinking, well, hang on a minute. There's cases where people have said, oh, yes, Dr. So-and-so, he had this, when they pass or have an near-death experience, which is most commonly on the operating theatre, and they say, oh, yes, you were doing this, you were doing that nurse passed you this, and they tell everything that happened there. So they were out of their body, it's called an OBE, out-of-body experience, which is a commonality of the near-death experience. And they come back and they and they say, yeah, I saw you doing this, and this. So they had to be there in their consciousness, out of their body consciousness, to be able to report back on it.
Yeah.
So
you see, that's one thing the program kind of got wrong. I think that there was near-death experiences, but also there was, as you say, out-of-body experiences, and it was kind of mixed into one. I suppose one thing the series wasn't doing, I mean, unfortunately, the first episode was called Near-Death Experiences. Mm-hmm. Later on, there was another episode, and that did have out-of-body experiences. I think the problem is maybe there's two different phenomena. Maybe the out-of-body experience could be termed as not actually having to do with spirit or anything, and actually that is maybe a part psychic experience, because without a doubt, again, you look at previous research and people came out of the bodies and they were able to describe the room, describe the person who came in, or the doctor or anything like that. Even though they had their eyes shut, they wouldn't know about it. Now the scientists always say, well, that's because your hearing is the last thing to go before you die, so you hear everything. However, forgot which doctor it is, but if I remember correctly, there was a series of out-of-body experiences happening in the 70s. So this doctor decided to put objects on top of the cupboard. So he put a small ball, a red ball, or he would put a book or something like that. And these people would have these out-of-body experiences, and he would say, can you see anything around? Can you see anything on top of the cupboard or anything? And they say, oh yeah, there's a red ball. So straight away he knew that there was something happening.
Yes. I mean, I think going on something you mentioned, when you look at the near death and the out of body, I feel it's like I say, the faculties of same as psychic and mediumship, and the near death experience is talking of talking to our loved ones who are in spirit. So you're talking about being there with them in your spirit form, and then looking at the out of body as almost like akin to a psychic experience, being here and now. There is a clear definition, but I think one is part of the other.
Yeah, it was. I thought it was a great series. When that opened up, I felt very, very positive.
Yeah.
It then went into the two medium episodes, and we talked about it last week. That was all fine and good. And then it came to Signs from the Dead People. What did you feel about this episode?
I was very tongue in cheek, having done a lot of sort of investigations in places, working with you, bless you. Then I've come to be not in a judgmental, but more sort of open, skeptical, but with that mediumistic background. I question things, like when you're looking at being in a building, you've got a voice recorder doing EVP, electric voice phenomena, because the human ear is generally 2 to 20 hertz, depending on your age and if you've got any sort of medical problems. but then the digital recorders can sort of pick up things that are far outside our own capabilities. And there's been some very good EVP. I mean, I remember talking to you, and there's been some stunning stuff, but then I felt they were looking for what they wanted. The EVP, the paranormal in general, can be very, 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 very subjective. It can be subtle, rather. They were looking in the building, and again, you only get what's shown on camera. And they've been to where you're building. Have they done previous research? Because it seemed to me, when they were saying that they had the EVP of that gentleman called Aaron Burr, did they do research about him being there in the first place? And their first bit of voice, which, to be honest, I listened and I listened and I listened, and I couldn't get anything, And
it's exactly what you're saying, though. I mean, the problem is with EVP, and I've done this myself, is you're listening to endless hours of in fact, I was laughing about this the other day because I shared with you an EVP that I've one little, I don't know, 3-second voice came out of, I don't know, 7 hours and I will, you can't pin me down on what it says because I have no idea. It sounds a bit like this or it sounds a bit like that, and that's always worried me about EVP, is that sometimes a noise or a bang or something like that recorded can sound very, very different. And you might say, well, I never heard that voice before. I never heard that. Well, you didn't, because it might have been a bang or a noise, or it might have been a cough or something like that. But when it's recorded, it sounds something completely different. Although, I mean, the best EVP I ever recorded is which I've talked about before, where we were doing a dowsing session in Derby Jail, and we said, was you over the age of 35 when you died? And something very clearly says, yes, bastard.
Yeah. No, I mean, it is. It's very, very clear,
Yeah. So it's, yeah, I mean, EVP is a really bizarre thing, because I personally think it's the only evidence we can really properly get. I'm not utterly convinced we can photograph ghosts or spirit. I'm not convinced. I don't think I've ever seen. I'm trying to think. The only footage that I have ever been sort of. I mean, what I am interested in is, there's footage and stuff, and there's like this black shadow passing by, and it just doesn't work out. But what does interest me is over 20, 30 years of doing this, when I've used things like webcams and I've had them recording over a long period of time, so a very long period of time, sometimes it could be 5 to 9 hours, and then you speed up the footage and you see this slow movement of shadows moving, and Bodmin Jail was a really good, I've got a really good piece of footage there where there's hours of nothing, when you're looking and you're thinking, oh, there's nothing here, absolutely nothing. But yet, when I sped up the footage by 1.5%, what you saw was actually slow movement of shadows walking around.
Yeah, I know. I find it fascinating, particularly. I mean, I think it was the galleries where there was a flower tray, or flour put onto a tray, flour you do your bread with, and there was a face impression or words that you could be saying as, or would you call it? It's almost like, I can't remember what you said, almost written in a different script or a different language, put over on there on a piece of coal in a locked room. Where did that come from?
Yeah, I mean, you saw. I mean, I posted something the other day, and it's an old webcam footage. The webcam was only triggered by movement, changing light, and yet an hour after we'd set this camera in a completely locked off area, you could not get into that place without the alarm sounding. The webcam would have picked up the sound. It would have all been tracked, and yet there's a very, very clear shadow of a person kind of moving around over about 3 or 4 seconds.
Yeah.
And
it's like somebody walking past an open door, or a bar door, just walking as if you imagine somebody walking up a corridor,
So I really kind of struggle that footage can't be taken, but I do have this belief that maybe it's how it's recorded, or maybe the sound vibrations or something like that is a way that we can get communication from spirit.
There's a book that, if you're interested in EVPs, There's a book called The Ghost of 29 Megacycles by John G. Fuller.
I've read that. I read that when I was
Oh,
It's,
it's a book.
it's a cracking book. Yeah.
But that was in the 60s, wasn't it? Sorry, the late 60s, early 70s.
Yeah.
You're looking at how they went about recording EVPs on a static, because obviously you're tuning into a radio station, you're putting a tape on, a cassette tape, but all you listen to is that white noise. And because at that time there wasn't as much or as many radio station, taxi firms, whatever on the air, so they used to do it. But I find it fascinating how they built it up. And the question is magnetic tape in the form of cassette tapes, is that better for picking up EVP than digital?
Well, it's interesting because what I always used to do is obviously I used to ensure that I had a mixture of digital, and I also used to have analog as well. So dictaphone, I had a tape dictaphone, and I obviously had a digital one as well. Interestingly, one would pick up stuff and then the other one wouldn't. And it was, the only annoying thing is on the tape, it's very, very hard to analyze because you've kind of got a whir of the motors and things like that being recorded as well. And I was listening, actually, I've got a very weird laugh recorded in Tutbury Castle, and it was recorded on a tape, and I tried to clear it up as much as possible. And obviously, from a skeptical point of view, you could say, well, because it's mechanical, things can go wrong. It probably recorded a bit, that there's always going to be that little bit of doubt there with any EVP. And I think the main thing is like what we're like with mediumship, is we keep a very open mind, and when we are ghost hunting or anything like that, we keep an open mind about what things are. And when you do EVP or when you're photographing things, then you do have to keep a very open mind, especially when it comes to things like orbs or light anomalies on video cameras and stuff like that. There's so many reasons why these things could actually be something physically and earthly.
Interesting on that, Martin. Sorry, jumping in. When you're looking at that episode, they're looking at Polaroid film and catching things on it,
let's just talk about we'll move on to the Polaroid, actually. But let's talk about just my final sort of sum up on the lady who was ghost hunting.
Yeah.
On a positive, I thought it was great that there was just two of them. Admittedly, there was a camera crew there, but that's a great way of investigating the place, because you're removing anything that can cause issues within the environment. And as Lloyd Auerbach, who's on that, who I've known for a long, long time, Lloyd Auerbach said, ghost hunting equipment is not there to record ghosts, but actually to monitor the environment. That's absolutely bang on, and I've been saying that for years in my ghost hunting courses that I've done. Is you're just monitoring the environment. You want to see the change in the environment. You want to see what comes into that environment and makes a change. That's what you're looking for. You're not ghost hunting.
Yeah.
The problem is I had with that section is obviously the footsteps didn't make any sense at all. That she was sat there asking, can you make a noise or whatever it was, or is your name Aaron Burr? And then suddenly there's these bangs as footsteps. Because how can you record footsteps but yet they didn't hear them unless somebody was tapping on the microphone? Well, that's the blooming skeptic in me.
Well, yeah, but I think you have to be, because if you are too far one way, you believe in everything, as we used to have belly grumble at 2:36 a.m. and people thought it said get out. It's things like that, but we only saw little snippets on the show, so you don't know what else led up to it. But it's nice to hear, but then you're thinking, well, what's the substance, what's the context, isn't it?
Well, I suppose we've got to talk about the Polaroids, John Huckett's Polaroid. Again, if you've not seen the program, a gentleman, I think it was in the late 60s, early 70s, living in Hollywood, living in not a luxurious house. It looked like it was a very artistic house, quite quaint, American quaint type single story it looked like, didn't it?
Yes, yeah, it did.
And apparently in the late 60s, early 70s, he was given a Polaroid, and one night he'd heard a noise in the bathroom and he decided to take a photograph with his new Polaroid camera. And as he took the photograph, there is what looks like a mist or something. And then over time, he started taking more photographs when he felt like he wanted to. So it's almost like a psychic or mediumistic compulsion to take a photograph. And he took a photograph, and suddenly there were words on there. So there was words on there, help, or hello, I'm here. And then for probably last 30 years or so, he's been taking these photographs with his Polaroid, even having Polaroid parties where people would come
and bring their own camera, wasn't it? And
bring their own Polaroid camera. And some people had unusual photographs, but he was constantly churning out these Polaroids. And unfortunately, what's happened is that similar experience to you and your Aura camera, I suppose, Ian, that they've stopped making the film.
I mean, obviously, the film he used was, as he put it, longer than the F600 ones, which is, I'm not quite sure, I think just a factory name. But it's the same thing. You know, you have sheets of 10, you put it in a little box, and you pull a tab, and they're all ready then. He was saying that, most of the Polaroid film develops in the same way, although he put it as a different process, different chemicals. But I thought, well, no, they're all the same way. They have the same chemical process. You know, it takes a couple of minutes to, once you're taking your photo, to come through. So it is there, but they have stopped making them. There's somebody currently looking into starting it again. They want to fund me and whatever, you know, so whether that comes off. But people don't want Polaroids now. They want all this click and whatever and just does it, you know. But looking at...
You say that, but yet, do you know what? My son's best friend, 2 years ago, he got a brand new version of the Polaroid, and it's a lot smaller photograph. It's like almost like a very small 2-inch by 2-inch thing. Yeah, so it was like really retro sort of thing. It was like, what? You're going back to this? Do you know what?
But you know what? Looking at the sort of stuff he has on, because I was thinking, you know, in a bit of a skeptical way. But
what did you think? What did you think to this?
One of the things is, you know, where, you know, with my Aura camera, I did a lot of tests with it, what it could do, what affected it, the lighting conditions. I wanted to know everything about it, my analytical side. And I was at this place doing Aura photographs and readings, you know, which is one of my fortes. And I noticed when I pulled this camera, you know, pulled the film out, and I was talking to this lady, and then I took the strip back, and there's an off yellow, you know, similar to the colour they were getting, a mass to the left hand side of it. And she was looking at me. I said, I haven't got a clue what this is. I said, I can say definitely it's not mediumistic. It's not any spirit trying to come through, whatever, you know. And I was looking around and I thought, what's causing it? Then my guide said, sun. And I thought, hey. So I looked up, and I was in line of a skylight through which the sun was coming on, and it was beaming onto the back of my backdrop. I have two tripod stands, and I hang a black sort of photographic sheet,
background.
Background. And it was shining onto there, so I thought, I'm going to test this, and it came out the same every single way. So on that instance, that's one of them. But I told my mediumship friends, what do you reckon this? And everybody come up. It was an old lady, it was a man, it was a hedgehog. Do you know what I mean? And I thought, no, it's sun onto the background. It shows how people can get drawn into things. My feeling is he writing on the back of the film without not writing in ink, but with an object, say with a pen with the nib in, and just highlighting what he wants to see, and then taking a photo, and it shows up in that colour, you know.
Yeah, I mean, I really struggled with it, and I remember a case years ago, and somebody said, well, you know, when you ghost hunt, you should always use Polaroid because they don't have negatives that you can tamper with, which is true. But I am pretty sure that if you wanted to tamper with that film, you could somehow tamper it like he's done. And I actually went online and had a look. I searched for him and I had a look for his Polaroids, and I had a look at his Polaroids a little bit more deeper. A couple of things kind of stood out to me. Firstly, there was that lighting effect that you've just described. I was going to talk about that, and you've mentioned it perfectly. The Polaroid, the camera, is very, very susceptible to sunlight and bright, intense light, and it can completely wash out a photograph. In a review with NPR, which is like a public radio in America, I believe, he said that he felt they were vortexes. So what we're getting is an interpretation here, or at least he's trying to align the photographs with a common spiritual belief.
Yeah.
Not mine, to be honest,
No,
but he's aligning with that. And then I did really have difficulty with the writing. The font was consistent when I've had a look online for 30 years. So that suggests to me that there's only one hoaxer, and it suggests that it's him. I know he's an artist, and indeed the photographs have actually been in an in an art gallery and in exhibitions and things like that. So I just don't know if it's some sort of twisted art installation. And unfortunately, what's happened is the spiritual community. So I think it's an art thing. I'm pretty sure. Do you know how some people do hoax art, or
yes,
you've got people like Banks who do graffiti, but it's classed as high art. I think sadly what's happened is Leslie Keane, who I believe she mentions him in her book, has took it hook, line and sinker that he is actually experiencing real phenomena, when I think there's a bigger picture here to be had.
I do feel as well. I think, granted, as we said throughout the podcast, it's you only see a little bit of what the filming was, so you don't see everything, so you don't get a clear picture start to finish, do you? But going on what you said, the spiritual community, they want to believe so much, and this is where it's nice to be open-minded. You don't have to be skeptical or a total believer, but as I said, but that's sort of my Polaroid. People saying it's anything from a woman wearing glasses to a dog carrying 4 children. I know that's a little bit of an over the top.
No, you're right though, because I remember I mean, this was early. This must have been 2001, and I appeared. I consulted on a program called Scariest Places on Earth. We took them to Chillingham Castle, and unbeknownst to me, and I've mentioned it before, where the TV producers decided to. It was a very early reality program in that it was scripted. So they were doing a ghost hunt, but it was scripted. And they claimed that there was a vortex in the chapel, and the father was dragged through it and never seen again. Yeah, just real. I mean, heavily real, obviously. But interestingly, somebody sent me a photograph afterwards, and they said, "Can you see anything on this?" And I said, "No, I can't see anything." They said, "Well, my daughter's face is very washed out, and we can't work out why." And it was obvious that it was the exposure, the sun was shining on her face. It was all bleached out. And I said, "Oh, could I share this on my website?" And that's what I did on mysterymag.com. I put it on there and said, "Can you please look at?" I said, "Any readers, please look at this photograph, and then please drop me an email with what you can see." That's all I put. I didn't influence it in any way.
Yeah.
And we had about 100 or 200 emails. Apparently there was a soldier in full armor. There was another child stood next to her. There was, honestly, there was millions of explanations of what that people could see. And I couldn't see any of it, to be honest. No. I was looking. I couldn't even work out the armor, apart from the mistaken maybe a piece of wall or something like that.
But that's it, though. People will see what they want to see, or they look too deeply into it, and pareidolia comes into it as well, doesn't it?
Yeah, and pareidolia obviously is where, as I sent to you once, I see faces in carpets. It's when we see faces and things, and that's one thing that makes humans so special, is that we are incredible at seeing beyond a pattern or making patterns. We have this incredible mind of connecting the dots, which can also be our downfall as well.
Yes.
And this is the problem where the other day I had an argument with somebody about orbs, and they said, "Well, this orb's got a face in it." I said, "No, it doesn't. It's just you think it looks like it's got a face in it." Yeah. He said, "Yeah, but it's Abraham Lincoln." I said, "I cannot see Abraham Lincoln in it." And that's the thing, is it was a strange episode, really, to be honest. The ghost hunting was kind of, it was interesting and great that they kept it to a small group. Some of the toys she had, and I will use the term toys because that's all they were, shouldn't have been there really. She should have learned a bit better from there. But it was an okay episode. And then the next one was which one was the next one now? Was it and in Signs of the Dead? Do you want to explain what happened in that one?
Yeah, they were looking at, I mean, I was a little bit sort of skew with it. I thought of, I think I'll fast forward it. That was the feeling with me, because it was about birds and feathers. I saw a robin or butterflies, and it comes down to, I mean, you would probably have a better understanding than me, or be able to put it over better, but, the belief in robins and butterflies as representing somebody who's passed over, they're in Celtic folklore, the Irish folklore and stuff, I did a little bit of reading about
I think it was it was all about sort of crisis apparitions, weren't it? And there was two sides, really, wasn't there, to the story. There's two sides to this episode in that, firstly, they discuss crisis apparitions. So that's when a visitation from somebody who'd recently deceased, and they see that person appear. So there was that aspect. And then there was the end of life visions from bedside of people, who were close to dying. I was really took in by that.
Yeah. The thing is, it's a very real situation, where I can remember my sister saying about my mum, about a day before she passed. She was saying, what's taking them so long, and then passed, within 24 hours.
I remember I mentioned it a couple of times about my granddad. Again, he was an absolute skeptic, and he told me that when he was, I think it was about 17, his granddad was dying. He'd been bedridden and he'd been paralyzed, really. Nothing at all. No movement from him, just very shallow breathing for ages. And then the doctor said, look, his breathing's changed. I think he's going to pass away. So they all went to see him, and literally 2 minutes before he died, he sat up and they went, oh, they're here for me, sort of thing. And he said that he could see his mum and his dad. He went, right, I'm going now, and laid down and died. So I find it really fascinating.
I do. Sorry, Matt, I'm talking over you there, Martin. I think it's very, very good evidence, to be honest. I know people thinking, well, that is what people are taught to believe, and therefore they're going to see who they want to see. On my own sort of experience, where I was with my sisters and my brother, when my mum was passing, and I could see my nana walked in, sort of looked around. There was a gentleman who stood by, I'm from North Wales, and they call the front room the parlour, and I was and at the parlour door was this gentleman pacing backwards and forwards, and I sort of said to him in my mind, who are you? And he came back with, oh, do you know what? Isn't it awful?
Wasn't it an uncle or something?
Yeah, it was my granddad, but he was my dad's dad.
Yeah.
Yeah, and he had the same name, and I can't remember my dad's name. I'm sorry, that sounds bad, doesn't it?
We'll let you off.
Well, no, I mean, it's a long story, but it just came back. He told me his name was the same as my dad's, and I thought it was there. But then my sister has all of these old photographs. She says, "Okay, show me." She looked through it, said, "That's him," and she gave me his name and said, "That's your dad's. That's our dad's dad." And I've never met him, and yet it turns out that my mum nursed him when he was passing, and he's probably popped back to check on her.
Yeah, it was really interesting, and I think it was. I felt it was very tastefully directed,
Yes,
because there was stories from and footage from people who'd taken part in this research by a psychiatrist, wasn't he? Basically, he was talking to people who were suffering from terminal illnesses or illnesses and were expected to die, and he was talking to these people and asking about their experiences. There was a young child in there as well, and it was interesting. The older people, or the people who had a bit of age to them, they were visited by people that they knew, or people that they knew it within their family.
Yeah.
And one thing that I've read since as well is that children who are terminally ill are often visited by animals. So they're visited by dogs that they've known that have passed. I am a skeptical believer. So I, on one half, I'm kind of saying, well, why aren't the children being visited by the people? But then I think, well, do you know, if from a spirit perspective, do you know, if your dead grandma was to suddenly turn up, that would be quite shocking to a child.
Yeah.
Where if a dog that's passed turns up, then that would possibly be more accepting and be more of a companion
I think so. Yeah.
to take you into the spirit world. I mean, what did you feel about that? I mean, are you skeptical? I know we know there's a phenomenon there, but what did you think to the program, and what did you think to the cases that they talked about?
Very, very like-minded with you, Martin. It was tastefully done. That's one thing I will say about the series in general. It was very balanced, and it was empathetic. You know, they took that sort of tone, you know, and they're very much sort of respectful to people's beliefs, you know, and I just found it very, very heartwarming, you know, talking about that, you know, about somebody being there, because, you know, you hear it a lot of times, you know, and it's particularly common in hospitals and nursing homes, you know, where people are on their last legs, so to speak. And I just want to say to people, Spirit told me my dad's name's Danny, so I've just been sort of I let people know, so you don't think I'm being bad to my dad. Okay, but when you look at this situation, okay, Martin, it's very much coming over to. I thought it was a nice balance. They were not over the top pushing it at you, but they weren't skeptical either. They're sort of doing the D. Scott Rogo, you know, sort of providing evidence and helping you make your mind up, you know. But I just found, like you, when you look into your children, you know, it's probably children that said, don't go off with strangers. So if grandmother has passed where they've never met, they would likely be put off. You know, I mean, I don't know, because children say as it is, who the hell are you? You know, so a past animal, you know, bunny rabbit, a cat, a dog, then they are more likely to be open and go, you know. So I feel it was nice there.
I think also as well is what was interesting about this is they followed a young couple who it brought me to tears, to be honest. Was they'd lost their son.
Yes.
They got trapped by a tree and couldn't breathe, and it was obvious that the father was far more open in accepting the experiences and his belief that his son had come back and given some sort of evidence. I felt that the mother, I mean, obviously, I mean, you could tell that she was still incredibly grief-stricken. And to be honest, hands up, I mean, I've got two sons, and I don't know how you would kind of recover from the death of any of them, from one of them. And she was obviously still grief-stricken. It did seem that she did have some form of evidence to me. She was stood in the kitchen, and suddenly she got a very strong smell of her son, and a feeling that he'd walked past. I think that was her experience. And they both went to almost like it was a bit strange, wasn't it? It was like a psychic weekend, but it was for people. It was but for people who'd had people pass away. It was kind of I was trying to work it out because it wasn't a psychic weekend, but it was a psychic weekend, if you know what I mean.
Well, yeah, I mean, it was trying to help them sort of tune in and, you know, sort of go into a meditative state. Can you come close? Are you there? Let me know. Show me a sign. There is that. And skeptics will probably say, oh, yeah, playing on the vulnerable. They'll all just lost somebody. They're going to hear what they want to hear. Again, you only saw little bits of snippets of it, and that gentleman did go, and then, you know, he saw, I've got a smell, I've got a whiff. But I found personally in his own quietness, you know, of writing down, asking, can you give me some words? And then I just liked how he questioned, you know what I mean? I thought, well, is it me? I think, was his name Ginsberg or something, where he was sort of asking questions, you know, if it is you, give me something I don't know. And then you got that I am red, and you're thinking, what the hell's this? You know, I found,
that was the
am I getting different blokes? Sorry.
Yeah, you're getting, that was the family at the beginning, wasn't it? That yes. Was again, that was another son who passed away.
Yeah.
And that was at the beginning of that of this program, if I remember. Yeah, that was interesting because he wanted a sign from his son, didn't he? They had a running joke in the family about, or was it finding a quarter on the floor, or find,
Yes.
and he walked into his son's bedroom, which had obviously they'd kept how it was when he passed away,
Yeah.
and they'd obviously kept it clean, and he heard a noise, and there was a coin on the floor, and I seem to remember that he heard his son say kind of make a joke about it, and he was a bit shook up about that, and then looked at the coin, and the coin year was actually the year that his son was born, and it reminded me of the guy from the first few episodes, constantly looking for
Yes. Yeah.
evidence
I felt that. Yeah.
instead of accepting the first set of evidence. And it's interesting that it was the man male again, who was pushing more. But they were after more evidence. And I think the evidence that came was, he said, "Oh, I am red," which was really intriguing. And then, was it a couple of days later, they got a picture. This woman had chosen this picture, and she said, because was it from a spiritualist artist?
Yeah, it was from a psychic artist, where they'd done a drawing of the outline of a figure, a man, sort of in the background, celestial, holding up the sky as such, and it was coloured red. But again, you don't know how much information somebody said, or he's lost his son, whatever, and there. But it was come back over, I think, when he was reading out what the explanation is. Red means a young soul. Now, whether that's a young in the young age of a soul, in the eons a person can live, or whether it's a young as in physical young,
Yeah.
So, but I just found it that really piqued my interest, because I'm a psychic artist, and I thought, well, funny enough, that is how things work. But it didn't show you, did somebody order it for him or whatever. But when it came through, I am red, and it's there, I thought, wow, it's very, very good evidence.
Yeah, it was. It was. Yeah, again, there's all sorts of bits and pieces you could dissect from this episode. And
Yeah.
I mean, again, overall, it's interesting. You could, I mean, obviously, from a skeptical point of view, you could say, why is that couple organising this weekend? I mean, they'd had their own grievances, and somebody had passed with them, so they were organising these weekends,
Yeah.
and I think it was just a simple way of trying to start the healing process.
Yes. You're with like-minded people, you know what I mean? So you're not going to get laughed at or judged or talked down to, or get over it, pull yourself together type things, which can happen. But I just think here, this is where the film, I don't think, went in to say how long it was before the passing of his son, before he went to these things. You know what I mean? Was it total grief or what? But it could be looked at in a positive way, as as a healing, as you started to say.
Yeah. I think that's one thing that the skeptics really get wrong about mediumship, is why are they charging £50, or why are they charging this? And often, and in fact most of the time, a medium will agree to a reading, not aware that it's because of a recent loss or anything like that. So to say that mediumship is taking advantage of people who are grieving is really misunderstanding how and why a medium is reached out to. And yeah, I mean, it's interesting. I mean, I've talked to lots of mediums over the years, and I've asked them, how quickly from somebody passing, have you ever had somebody be in touch? And I always remember, you remember Barry Chessman, don't you?
Yeah.
And he said he once did a spiritualist church, and somebody was there who'd lost somebody that afternoon.
Yeah.
And they were there giving a reading about him.
Yeah, it is. I mean, at the end of the day, the person's no longer physical; they're in the spirit world. If on that point of view. So yeah, I mean, I've had people come through. It's been about a day or 2 days. People say, but they haven't been buried yet. It's as if they can't through until they've been buried.
Yeah.
But there's other times people saying, "Oh, I've been coming for years to try and get a reading," and the person just doesn't come through. So, I always say to people, part of it is the way in which the person passed. I found that a person having a mental illness, severe, I suppose depression could be put, into a severity that way, or when you have, do you call it dementia? But it's where their mind is, where they don't know where it is, in a dark place. It takes them a little bit more time to come through, and the same with a person who sadly finds themselves having to take their own life as the only option. Those two, I mean, that last one, it's got a certain energy feel. As soon as you get that energy feeling, you think, this person feels guilty, doesn't want to talk, wants to say hello, but am I going to get shouted out? I'm so sorry, I wish I hadn't, and all those things. So they can be difficult ones, you know what I mean, as in difficult emotionally, you know what I mean, for the person having the message and the medium delivering, but
I think there's a higher complexity in terms of in the terms of how and why a spirit comes through. And as you say, there may be the physical aspects that were experienced on Earth, whether that's dementia or suicide or anything else, that might have an implication on there. But I think also as well is the complexities of relationships as much as anything.
Definitely.
And that's a big point, because it's always opened my eyes where people say, well, I didn't really want to talk to them, or I wanted to talk to that person. And the reason why you're not talking to that person is either spirit is not ready, or you're not ready to receive the information from both of you, and it'll come, but you just have to be patient. And yes, as you said, it could take another week, but it could also take another year. It could take a decade.
It could, it could, but like I say, it is a real definite thing. Where I've had it several times where people say, I don't want to talk to them, whether they've had a grievance, most unlikely, and spirit might want to be saying sorry, but they don't want to hear because they still carry that grievance. I just found the whole way there, part of the healing process, but searching for that information all the time and wanting more.
I mean, that was a running theme, wasn't it? I mean, we've highlighted here where that need for further evidence. I mean, especially, obviously, I'm looking at this as a ghost hunter and a medium. I kind of think, what drives my further evidence is not evidence that spirit exists, but it's kind of, I know that it exists, but from a personal level, I'm intrigued, especially when it comes to ghosts, because I think ghosts, there's two concepts there. There's the recording side, and then obviously there's also the spiritual side. But I found that there was something, probably on a psychological level, why the two males in this who were after evidence after evidence after evidence after evidence, and I think it's personally unhealthy, to be honest.
It can be.
I think certainly that first guy I was really frustrated with, to be honest, that he was making up names, traveling to mediums, getting the evidence again, getting the proof he wanted, and then he wanted to do it again. Yes. And I'm thinking, you're not looking at this spiritually. You're just looking at this, that I need that gratification, that I needed that evidence again. So I it might be the program and how the program's edited it, and the program might have said, oh, we've got this Dutch medium coming over, your family, you should take your family there, there's more evidence. And his story ultimately came to an end when that medium we previously discussed seemingly faked from Facebook.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Which I thought was a really bad ending to that whole mediumship segment.
Yeah, definitely.
So the program finished how it started, really. It finished what I thought was on a very strong episode. And it was about reincarnation. Just very briefly, my sort of thoughts on reincarnation, I have been very, very skeptical about reincarnation, really skeptical. And it took two things to change my mind. And number one was my own son. And I'm pretty sure that spirit or the spirit world or whoever purposely sent Owen to change my mind. So that changed my mind. And then also a very good friend who who talked to me about the experiences of his son and how his son explained to him about his experiences in India before he was born, which were very similar to my son's by an amazing coincidence, or maybe not. So there was a lot of questions, and so I've been quite open this last 5 years towards reincarnation. I watched this program. I was quite impressed, actually, to be honest, by what I saw. I couldn't see any holes in the stories. But maybe I'm getting a bit too soft in my older years. But I mean, what did you feel with all three stories?
Again, the theme that I'm getting, apart from episode 1 and 2, which was the mediums, I thought it was very, very nicely done. Where they've obviously done their background research, and they've been very, very sensitive, in the approach they've done. So I do like that of it, and I just found it. Say believable or plausible isn't necessarily the words I want to use, but it gets you thinking. And I like me, I'm quite open-minded to it. I've had a couple of things when my one of my nieces was saying, but generally speaking, from a spiritualist background, we were told you're not allowed to talk about the reincarnation because you can't evidence it, you can't prove it. There's no evidence to say of this and that, but the episodes put that over, as you said, a little child. Then you
in terms of evidence, the Hollywood star was mind blowing. The Hollywood guy, because he said things. I mean, this little boy I think it was 65 items, weren't it? 65 statements.
Yeah.
And his daughter, it was his daughter, weren't it? And also his niece or whatever, his cousin. And his daughter disagreed with some of them things. It was only after researching and reaching out to other family members, they said, "Oh yeah, it was that, And I mean, how this pre-internet days? How do you know that's some guy called, what was his name, Marty Morty or something? How did you know that his favourite place was France and he liked wearing a hat and smoking cigars in France or something? Or how did you know he had a green car, or he liked the ladies, or he liked to dress nice, or he started out as a dancer and then he was an agency and he knew Errol Flynn or whatever it was. It was like, what?
As well, but the thing is, why would a young girl want to even know that stuff? You know what I mean? And where's the interest? The one that got me was that young child who was talking about his other family, his other mum, his dad, and he.
Oh yeah,
that was for me. That was OMG. When he was, that's my dad. That's the house, and it wasn't a case of, is this the house shown in one photograph? There was multiples. The house. I'd be nice.
That was amazing, because what did the investigator said? I have never had anyone, and I was watching I actually rewound it and looked at the child. He looked at every photograph.
Yeah, definitely.
Straight away, he recognised them.
Yeah,
and basically, just to explain everybody, that this investigator came and he had pictures of the mother, the father, a playground that the child claimed that he'd regularly visited.
Yeah.
And he mixed it up with photographs that looked similar, so they didn't stand out or anything like that. And then he showed them this child, and he said it was highly unusual that somebody picked, the photographs bang on every single time. And he showed the photographs, and you could see the recognition in the child's face.
Funny enough, I was looking for that. I was watching, I watched it on my PC, and my head was really close to the screen, seeing if his eyes lit up.
He did when it said, "Oh, who's your dad?" He looked to the right straight away and went there. That was it. He recognised him. You could see it. It was like it gave me chills. I'll tell you what did give me chills about this. There was another case as well about a child who, in a former life, was a pilot. And that was fascinating. A lot of evidence in there. I think what stood out to me was that his dad said, well, what ship was you on? And he said, oh, the Tahoma or something. He said,
yeah.
And his dad said, well, that's a Japanese ship. He went, no, it's not. It's like, and even his dad didn't recognise that the ship. But that on the face of it, there seemed to be a lot of evidence. As you say, the child who was a child in a past life, and there was a bigger story there, but that was absolutely fascinating, and I found the film star as well. I thought that was really intriguing. But what stitched all this together was the fact that all three of them had since lost the memories. Yeah. That was really intriguing. That, and I think they got to 7 to 10 years old, and that was it. The memories started fading.
Yeah.
And that intrigued me, is how and why. So that means that we could have gone through God knows how many lives, and the memories have gone, utterly gone. Because he could, the film star child, he couldn't answer any questions, could he? He just literally, it had gone. It's almost like the memories of this life had completely overwritten the previous memories.
It is, it is a facet of that, where spirit sometimes mention, like we're all, every life we've had, we're all a facet of that makes up our soul, and so we could, I dare say, under a deep hypnotic state, recall said past lives. That would be interesting.
I disagree with you there. Totally disagree with you.
Well, that's fine.
I'll argue with you. I'll tell you what about that. I have a real issue with hypnotherapy, and I'll tell you why. Is because I've investigated the alien abduction.
Okay.
And I've seen the use of hypnotherapy, and I don't believe in it. I don't believe you can be hypnotized. All that stuff where you see people eating onions and all that sort of stuff.
Yeah.
There's a whole load of psychology going off there.
Okay.
And when it comes to people being being hypnotized to find further evidence, I really struggle with it. Yeah. And I always remember. Do you remember Toya Wilcox?
Yes.
Who she's a British pop star. She was once hypnotized to a past life. She said she could see herself in a room. She was she was dressed all in black, and she was a young girl, and she was in a room with a locked door and just a window. And she said, I'm being told that I am an anchorite. And she said, and this is a girl who is locked up for the town's sins almost, and she's locked in there. She's a virgin and locked there, and she has to pay penance for the whole town. So everybody went, wow, I never heard of this, never heard of an anchorite or anything like that. And so a researcher looked into it, and it turned out that Toya Wilcox had actually played an anchorite in a film.
Oh, right.
Yeah. So it was like, oh, right, is that, and that's the problem with the human mind, is if my wife's watching a program and I'm reading a book, I am still watching that program whether I know it or not.
Yeah, of course, but what I was trying to put over is more so maybe thoughts reached, should we say, through the deep subconscious mind. Trance can bring that sort of thing through. So that's why I mentioned on that way. But when you look at it, you're looking at the search for Bridie Murphy. That was done through a hypnotic thing, and there was no proof and evidence at all, was there, of it? So
No, but the best reincarnation story is the Jenny something or other. I forgot what her name is. Do you know? I think it might be Jenny Murphy or something like that. And it's where this woman suddenly started having these very strong visions in her mid-30s, if I remember correctly. I think she'd got 3 kids, and suddenly she started recalling memories of living in Ireland. She didn't live in Ireland, but she described a village, a small village. She described having children, the names of the children. And she ended up going over to Ireland and going to this village where she thought she lived. And she started talking to somebody. She went, oh, yeah, Peter's still alive, her eldest son.
Yeah.
So she knocked on the door and started talking to him. And in fact, her children had no doubt whatsoever, the information that she gave, that she was, in fact, their mother, reincarnated.
Oh, wow. Yeah.
Now, I mean, since then, skeptics have pulled it apart and said, well, the map of the village is not quite right. She got the age of the date of birth or something wrong with the listings of, the age groups of the children. But I'm thinking, you're saying that 20% of the information is wrong. All right, then how was she able to go to a village, knock on the door, and give 80% accurate information?
Yeah.
That to me is a great hit.
It is. I mean, it's okay saying 20% is wrong. What about the 80% that's right?
Exactly. And that's the thing. That's what really kind of got me. But again, I mean, that's why I've always been slightly skeptical about reincarnation. But it did really open my eyes, this series. I mean, I've read this stuff for years, and same for you. But it was so nicely done. Where if this had been on the BBC or ITV, you would have had 40 minutes of this program, and then you would have had 20 minutes of somebody utterly ripping it to bits.
Exactly. Yeah.
And you would have had 3 or 4 skeptics on there to provide balance. Now, the thing is, we don't need balance. You can either take it or leave it. You can watch it and go, this is a load of nonsense, I don't believe it. Or you can watch it and go, well, I don't believe that, but that's really interesting.
Exactly.
And that's the problem. That has been the problem with the whole media, really, is, we've got to have it for balance. Now, I understand in certain circumstances where things may affect a particular life or understanding. So, like history or you've got to have a balance, and it's got to be displayed with authority, and it's got to be shown in detail. But a program like this, just for them to have free hand to look at the evidence, display the evidence, and then you at home can make your own mind. I thought it was so refreshing together.
It is. I mean, that's I mean, like I say, as we said when we started the first part of the podcast, I was reluctant to watch it at first because I thought it was going to be a Kilroy program again, in ripping everything to pieces. But it was very tastefully done,
Kept away from the sensationalism, I thought, as well.
Yes.
I know we have certain disagreements about the mediums and the medium aspect, and I think that was weak, and the ghost hunting part was weak.
Yes, definitely.
But and it could have been done better. You could have had proper parapsychologists in there. Could have had proper discussion about units. They had Chris Rowe from Northampton, who I think they could have given him a bigger role, and how he's looking at expanded consciousness and how that really, there's lots of opportunities for series 2 if they, kind of maybe expand it more and maybe look at the different aspects. But
there's one thing I want to mention just for readers, Martin. If you want to look further into reincarnation, then there's a book, 20 Cases Suggestive of Reincarnation, by the American Society of Psychical Research. And if you have Amazon Prime, there's a series of programs called Ghost in My Child. It's back from 2013, 2014, and that's on Amazon Prime. It's free to watch videos. Again, reincarnation with children. Not as strong evidence as there is in this, in these episodes, but it still gives you thought to look at.
Sounds excellent. Well, thanks very much again, Ian. It's been an interesting. It's been an interesting thing to watch, because I was like you and I thought, here we go. And I've got Amazon Prime and there's some documentaries on there that I just laugh out loud.
Yeah.
And because it's just so badly put together, or, sometimes it's too believer, sometimes they're throwing stuff at you and you just think, oh my God, what? You can't believe all this, surely. And this was a very, very nice mix. It did make me question. It made us talk about it. I'm sure it's making other people talk about it. So a really good start to the year in terms of sort of media content, I think, and talking point.
Definitely. It's food for thought. It makes me want to go back to my books and start reading again. That's the sort of feeling it gives for me, which I'm always welcome of that.
Yeah, absolutely. Okay, well, we'll be back with another episode very, very soon. And if you've ever got any questions that you would like to answer, like us to answer on the podcast, please message us through Facebook or drop us an email. And thank you very much for all your support out there. Yes. And thanks to you as well, Ian. Thanks very much.
Thank you, ladies and gentlemen, for all the support, and keep the questions coming, please.